right, thank you guys. It's great to be here in Moscow. It's both of our first time, so we're excited to be here and be delivering this content to you guys. All right, so we don't have a lot of time, and storytelling is the kind of thing that you can spend years thinking about and still not quite understand. So we're going to go really fast, but hopefully this will give you a good overview of the kind of work that we do. And kind of a broad idea of what storytelling is on a large scale. So storytelling is a bit of a juggling act. It can be a very difficult thing to balance. But at the bottom of that juggling act is structure. Structure is the most important part of storytelling. It's the king of storytelling. And when I talk about structure, what I'm really talking about is plot. What happens in your story? So from the beginning to the middle to the end, what's actually going on? And the way that we can define that is saying that, structure, storytelling is a narrative, so it's a sequence of events that is told in a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's like the dictionary definition of storytelling. And over time, lots of different ways have developed for trying to understand story structure. People have looked at stories from across different cultures, and they've tried to distill them down into different structures. And we won't talk about all of these, but we'll hit on a few of them today. So the way that you can think about structure is it's sort of like the DNA of story. It's happening behind the scenes, and when it's doing a really good job, you don't notice it. Usually you only notice structure when it's missing, or when something's not there. Like a beginning, a middle, and then no end. All right, so structure's at the bottom. On top of structure, we have character. Character is the who of a story. So good characters have different motives, they have different wants, they have different needs. And in the story, we get to see whether or not they accomplish those goals, whether they meet their needs. Setting comes next. Setting is the where and the when. Typically when we do storytelling, we don't spend a lot of time on setting. You can sum up setting really quickly. You could say 3 days ago in St. Petersburg, and bam, your where and your when are done. And a lot of times we can cover these things visually. So we'll see some examples of how setting is explained visually later in the presentation. Atop that, we have conflict. Conflict is, in my estimation, aside from structure, the most important part of your story. Maybe you've had this experience where someone comes up to you and they start telling you a story, and they go on and on and on, and then they finish, and you think to yourself, why did they tell me that story? What was the significance of this story? Most bad stories don't have conflict at the heart of them. A good conflict will draw your listeners in. If you don't have conflict, it's just a series of events. It's just a sequence. So we'll talk in depth about conflict a little later. And then rolling around on top there, we have the theme. Theme is the message. So the people listening to your story, they might not remember all of the details when you leave, but hopefully they'll remember the theme of what your story was. Okay, so we've got our kind of definitions out of the way. Storytelling is a sequence of events. It has a beginning, middle, and end. Characters, setting, conflict, themes, all of that stuff. Let's see what this actually looks like, though. So today we're going to be talking about different types of storytelling. Just raising your hand, how many of you use social media or different types of media to tell personal stories? Okay, a couple people. What about, how many of you use storytelling for professional work, either at school or at business? All right, great. So my experience is mostly in using storytelling on a professional side, doing it for work. There's some overlap in the middle. And then my colleague David, he's going to talk to you more about personal storytelling and storytelling for nonprofits. And together, we hope that these things kind of come together and form best practices for your own storytelling, whether you're doing it on a professional level or on a personal level. All right, what makes a good story? So what I'd like to do now is invite you to turn to a person next to you, and I want you to discuss this question for 1 minute, all right? Think about stories that you've heard in the past. Think about your favorite stories, your favorite movies, your favorite books. What makes them good stories? All right, so go ahead, turn to the person next to you, introduce yourself, and then see what you can come up with for an answer to this question. All right. So just real quick, you can shout them out. What were some of the things that you discussed with the person sitting next to you? What makes a good story? Any volunteers?
Vitality.
Vitality. All right, great. What else?
Interesting plot.
Interesting plot. Great.
I would say passion.
Passion.
And experience and knowledge.
Experience, knowledge. Okay, good. What else?
The person himself. The person himself.
Okay, good.
I believe that a good story is it's a short story.
Short story. Okay, so
That's
Suspense.
suspense. Great.
Funny stories. Funny stories.
Funny. Okay.
It can be unforgettable experience, like impression, terrible fire.
Sure. Unforgettable experiences.
Romantic.
Romantic.
Right characters, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Degree of how the story was written or language.
Okay, sure. Language, style, things like that. Great. All right, you guys have a pretty good overview of different things that make a good story. Unfortunately, we won't be able to cover all of those different things. There's some great ideas there. But I'm going to try to make it really simple. And I'm going to focus on 3 things for you guys. And they all start with the letter C. So they're pretty easy to remember. Okay. And these are the 3 things that I find to be most important in the stories that I try to tell. First one, back to it again, is conflict. So we can think of conflict as 2 forces that want something clashing into one another. Now, within conflict, there are different types. Probably the first one that we think of is external conflict. So that means something that is outside of our hero, outside of our protagonist that they have to conquer. So for example, if our hero has to climb a really, really tall mountain, and it's really scary and it's really dangerous, this is a great example of an external conflict. The second one is one that we don't think of as often, and that's internal conflict. So this isn't something physical that the hero has to overcome, it's rather something mental, something inside their own mind that they have to overcome. And so it can usually take the form of self-doubt. So let's say we have our mountain climber, and let's say that growing up, he had always been told by his parents that he wasn't good enough, and he would never be able to amount to anything. Now our character has some self-doubt. They have some doubt of their own ability, they have internal conflict. Or let's say that they were climbing the mountain one day, and they fell off and broke their leg. Ever since then, they've been a little scared to try to go up that mountain. Again, internal conflict that this character has to work through. The third one, and the much kind of larger one that we don't think of, is existential conflict. So something philosophical that the hero has to overcome. And this can take the form of these questions like, why does it all matter? What does it all mean? In Russia, you guys are great at philosophical conflict, right? I remember reading Dostoevsky as a child and grappling with all these deep philosophical questions, and that's existential conflict in a nutshell. So we have a tendency to think like conflict means that I'm getting in a fight, like it's like a battle or a war or something like this. Conflict doesn't have to be something like that. We all have different conflicts that we face every day. So maybe your conflict is you wake up and you go to get your cereal or you go to eat breakfast and breakfast isn't there. And then you go into the shower and someone used all of the hot water and you have to take a cold shower, okay? These are small conflicts, non-violent conflicts that we all face every day. So stories, whether you're using them for a personal or a professional purpose, should have some conflict at the heart of them. So that's the first one. The second C is cause and effect. So let me give you an example of this. If I give you a story and it goes, the king died, and then the queen died. Okay, we have two events, but there's not really a connection between these two events. So let's try to add cause and effect in here. So I say the king died, and then the queen died of grief. Okay, by adding this idea in there, by adding those two words, of grief, we've connected these concepts for our listener. That's cause and effect. Stories are defined by cause and effect. Look at your stories, make sure that the things that you're doing make sense within that story, and you have cause and effect. One thing leading to another. Therefore, this happens. This is an example that I used for, so I created a business called Splendid Beast, and what we did was we took people's pets and we turned them into oil paintings, and we put them into famous paintings. And we had a lot of success with that. Now I focus on media education, but that's kind of my background. And so this is a storytelling challenge that I took on myself to try to tell a story in 10 seconds without any dialogue that was only cause and effect, okay? And here it is. All right, so I present my poor drawing to my dog is unhappy, okay? I present a nicer painting to my dog is still unhappy. I present a nice oil painting to my dog, now my dog is happy, okay? So this is just this is real simple, but it's real basic cause and effect, okay? And a lot of stories that don't succeed, they don't take into account how events lead from one to another. So that's the second thing. Third thing is change. Make sure that your characters change from the beginning to the end. Okay, so if we look at this short story, and we graph time on the x-axis and happiness on the y-axis. My character, as time goes on, I get less and less happy. My dog is frustrating me. My dog, on the other hand, starts unhappy, stays unhappy in the middle, and then at the end goes through the roof, really happy, okay? So both of us have changed over the course of these 10 seconds, okay? So make sure that where your characters are at the beginning and where they are at the end change in some way. All right, so briefly, I want to talk about just some best practices that you can use when you're telling digital stories. And these are just a few things that I've picked up along the years that could help you in telling your stories digitally. First one, image versus word. And now we can even add another department to this. We could say video versus image versus word, okay? Video and image are always going to trump the word in modern society. We have limited amount of time in the day, and there are so many different competing forces vying for our attention. 90% of the information absorbed by the brain is visual, and we process visual information in 1/5 of the time that it takes us to process text information. And so anytime we can make that easier on our viewer by appealing to that visual literacy that we all have, it's better. Next thing, come up with your story first and your visuals second. A lot of times it's tempting, especially for me, because I buy a lot of new tech and I dream up these situations where I'm going to be using my technology, but I don't have a story in place. So we think about that structure at the bottom. Stories should serve everything else. Establish your structure first. Don't worry about the visuals. There have been great stories that have been told with visuals that aren't important, but that story is what matters. Third lesson, edit ruthlessly. Writers have a saying that when they're writing, they have to kill their darlings. Have you guys heard this expression?
Stephen King said it.
Yeah, Stephen King said it. And so this means that as you're writing, you're going to develop feelings for the things that you've created. But an audience doesn't know about those kinds of things. So as a storyteller, it's really tempting to maybe leave everything that you create in the final edit, but learning how to edit ruthlessly, learning how to edit objectively is a really valuable skill. And something that's really important to me is that not all stories require cameras. We tend to think of stories, especially in digital storytelling, as photo and video. But a lot of the stories that I'm telling now are taking the form of infographics or presentations or animation, things where I never pick up a camera. And so even if you're not maybe the kind of person who feels like they want to pick up a camera and make a video, there are other forms of storytelling that are accessible to you. And I'll talk about a few of those later on. All right. And engaging content. So as a small business owner, it was tempting to make content that was about myself and about my experience. But what I found, and talking to other business owners, they found the same things, is that the things that really resonate with people are the larger focuses, the themes, the beliefs, the lifestyles. That's what's actually going to engage your audience. And so this is like a really nice example for me of a brand-centric product versus a customer-centric product. On the left, you've got the ketchup that is brand-centric. Okay, we can read the label, but you have to tip it over in order to use it. Whereas the ketchup on the right, it's designed to be used by the consumer. They were focusing on the consumer's needs during that design process. And so they're focusing on their customer as they go along with this. So if you're using storytelling, especially digital storytelling, as a business owner, try to take the focus away from yourself and think about your customer. So with Splendid Beast, that's something that we focused on almost entirely. The only time we really posted about ourselves or about people was when it was people posing with the pets or the paintings that they had created. And we tried to feature these stories a lot. So we partnered with a pet shelter in Minneapolis, where I'm from. And this pet shelter had cats that people had abandoned. And this particular cat had been there for over 4 years. It was the longest time that they'd had a single animal in their shelter. And so what we did was we said, okay, we'll make a painting for your pet in the hopes that it would encourage someone to adopt it. And it just so happened that this cat was missing part of its ear. And so they named this cat Van Gogh. So we obviously saw the inspiration in that, and we designed this painting. And then a few weeks later, the cat was adopted, and they got to take the painting with them as well. So another example of just kind of trying to shift that focus away from us as a business and focus more on the people that we're reaching out to, the customers, the consumers. All right. Before I go into digital tools, I'd like to introduce my colleague, David Milana, who I work with at American Councils. And he's going to talk to you a little bit more about that personal side of storytelling and give you some of his own experiences.
Здравствуйте, как дела? Меня зовут Дэвид, очень приятно. That's all I know. So I'm here to tell you about my life as a digital storyteller. I became a professional in video and photography very organically, and it's something that I want to share with you. And I dug way back into my media files, all the way back into my teenage years. So hopefully you will come along with me for the story. It's got intrigue and passion. I didn't include the romance part, but I tried to put all those different things you said earlier. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. All right. Once upon a time, there was a first-generation Filipino-American boy born in California, falling in love with basketball. As you can see, I'm not the most genetically ideal for basketball, but I loved it. And one thing that I learned was that if I wanted to be a good player, I had to work harder than everyone else. And I know that a lot of Americans talk about like, oh yeah, sports and life and all this, but I did take that lesson from my childhood, that I had to make mistakes and that I really had to practice if I wanted to be good at anything. Another aspect of my personality was that I thought that I could learn anything by myself. I grew up before YouTube tutorials, before Google, so if I wanted to learn how to surf, I just found a surfboard and went in the water and fell 1,000 times until I stood up. And that's something that I think really became valuable for me later on in life. And about media, growing up in California, there were always cameras around, there were always just different things to do. You can skateboard and surf and play basketball or whatever. And with media, it was like, does anyone know the word tinker? Do you know that word? What it means to tinker? It's basically like to mess around with something and maybe you break it, maybe you don't, or you try to take something apart and put it back together. You just mess with something until you figure out how it works, right?
Tinkerbell, it's not Peter Pan.
I don't know if Tinkerbell is connected to this word, but definitely the same spelling. So like for example, if you get a new phone, right? There's two kinds of people. One person will put the phone aside, pick up the instructions, and then read everything. And then the other person will just pick up the phone and start messing with it and be like, oh, how do I do this? I don't know, this is not intuitive. I'm the second kind of person, right? And so with media, that works because I would see stuff on TV, I would see stuff in music videos, and I would just try to copy it. Like I didn't have the equipment, I didn't have any of the courses or knowledge, but I just tried my best. And what I didn't realize is that as I was tinkering, I was just getting practice. And that's the kind of the theme of my life. Like everything that I've tried has become practice for the next thing. And the next level of practice for me came when my brother, that's my brother, that's not me. He had a daughter. And all of a sudden I had these reasons to try and make media for things that were outside of myself, right? Like I could make a slideshow for my brother, and if he loved it, and if his wife loved it, it would make me look like a good uncle, you know, or if my sister, if she was with her nephew, or with my nephew, with her son, I just wanted to help her remember those moments, right? And so I was making videos, I was making slideshows, I was learning these programs, just as a way of like saving the memories of my life and the people that I loved around me. And it was great, you know, and I was living and working and trying to make money and pay high rent costs in California, but it didn't feel like enough. It felt like maybe there was something more for me to do, especially when it came to these tools and these stories. And I used to think like, in this really crazy way, like maybe I should just go find some homeless people and like make videos of them, like this really like out of line, entitled way. But in my heart, I just wanted to be able to use these tools to tell important stories to the world. And so I decided to apply for the United States Peace Corps, which is the government volunteer program. And I moved to a country called Kyrgyzstan. Many of you probably know, it's a former Soviet Union country. I have an interesting joke that I want to tell you. I don't know if it's funny in this country or not though. So when I would go to Kyrgyzstan, they would ask me, what's my name? I'd say, Atem Kim. And I would say, Menen Atem David, which means my name is David, right? But then David, they said like, what? Like, David? I said like, David. I said, David? I said, okay, David, right? And then they would laugh and say, oh, ha ha ha, Kachan 10 ke churasa, which means, when are you going to turn 10? No? Okay. I'll save that one for Kyrgyzstan. But I was having fun, being a volunteer, teaching English. You got it, yeah? When are you gonna turn 10 TSC? But I was teaching English, but it still felt like I was just connecting with my family and friends. And it wasn't until I started working on projects that I finally found my opportunity to use all of the digital tools to say something meaningful, to say something powerful. Because honestly, I think when we first start using media, we all want to make ourselves look like we are the hero of every story that we find. And the truth for me was that I was not the hero of the village that I lived in. I thought I was, right? I came from America, I'm gonna teach you guys English, and this new way of life, but it's the people that are there every day fighting for the students, fighting for the community. Those are the heroes. And it took me a process to realize that, but when I did, it was the best thing that happened to me. So in my village, at first, I wrote a small grant and we got water at our school, just running water, because before we didn't have any water, and the students would have to go outside. If it was snowing, they'd come out of the outhouse and just pick up snow and just wash their hands like that. And to me, something was really basic as running water they should have. So we wrote a grant, and we got the grant, and then I wrote a Facebook post about it. And it got me thinking, maybe I can use my skills in photography and video to see if we can get more water from more schools, right? But I didn't know how. I didn't know how to do that. I felt like, oh, I didn't study film, maybe I don't know how to do this right. But I just started putting stuff out there. I just started sharing. And I made a video of these two beautiful women. They are janitors at a school in a village in Talas, in the province. And this woman here on the right, Nuria, she was so sweet. Like when you take a picture of someone in a village, you want to make sure that they know why you're taking it, right? You don't want to just take pictures like selfies of you with a bunch of kids and then, like put it online. So I told her, I'm going to use this picture online. We're going to try to see if we can get water for your school. And she's like, that's fine. I don't have any teeth though. And I was like, it's okay, you're beautiful. If I can put this picture on, it's okay. And so I put this online, and someone from out of the blue contacted me, and I didn't know who it was. And it turned out she was this ex-supermodel from Germany who became a social entrepreneur. And she wrote me and she said, I saw your post on Facebook, and I want to get water for your entire province, right? And to me, that was like a real shock, because I didn't put this on Facebook for anyone except my family and friends, right? I just wanted to share what I was doing, share about these heroic women. And so I made a video because she wanted to know more, this person. And so now was finally my chance, and I was using all these tools that I learned from just making, surf videos and skate videos to tell the story of this woman who sometimes would have to melt ice to get water to clean the floors at the school, right? And I didn't put myself in the middle. She was the hero, as she should be. And this was all that the funders needed to say, okay, I want you to find as many schools as you can that don't have water and write out a budget for us, and we will make this happen, right? And so this is Monia here. She's giving a TED Talk about her life. She has a very interesting story herself. She runs projects all over the world. She was a runway model for Versace, and she was doing a photo shoot in India, and they had her wearing like this $10,000 dress, and she was looking out, and then she saw the shanties, like the slum area, and then she said in that moment she decided to change her life. And so meeting her was crazy because now I was doing something bigger than myself, bigger than just for my friends and family, and the only reason she knew about it was because of my digital media, and the only reason at all. So that to me was like, wow, this is very, very powerful. So she came and we had her visit all the schools and see the water, and I made a video of it, and I would like to show you now. He's doing too. So it's crazy because I saw that was 2013, which is 6 years ago, and it doesn't feel that long ago. But from there, it showed me that even though I didn't have the education or the best camera or any of the tools that I thought I needed, I had enough to tell the stories that were important to me, right? And I learned enough because I was willing to practice and make mistakes and try again. And now, I am able to work on creative projects all over the world. I recently did a music video in Ethiopia. I rapped in that video, which is kind of awkward for me. But yeah, one of my former students had a passion for music, so I was able to go back and use all these skills that I learned to help her fulfill her dream, which is more of a personal project, which I think is very important. I still do projects just because. I think that keeps your creative energy alive, it keeps it going. Like if you take something you love and then you just try to make money off of it the whole time, I think you lose something from that. Right? So I make sure to keep doing projects like that, while at the same time, I work on projects for American councils. We do camps and workshops where I will make the videos highlighting those events. And that's really cool for me as well because I believe in what we're doing, and it gives me a chance to show these students, students and participants like you guys that have come from all different backgrounds, all kinds of different challenges. and I get to show them as the heroes of their own stories. So my message to you all is that if you have any kind of interest or passion in storytelling, especially storytelling with media, now is like the perfect time to develop that. You know, with video stuff, I didn't learn until I was in college. Like I didn't have an email address until I was in college. And then I didn't get my first computer until I was almost done. So it's never too late to try and learn these things, especially now, because you can look everything up, right? And if you share what you have, do things that maybe are a challenge for you, but continue to just try and learn, then you can get your storytelling level to whatever level you want, right? Maybe that's to share stories with the world, maybe it's just to make your family and friends happy, right? But whatever level it is, it's possible. So yeah, I mean, all these things, I don't know, I mean, for me, my life has been a combination of growing up with these opportunities and then being able to have, I don't know, the foolishness to just mess around with things until I figured them out. And then when the opportunity came to use them, luckily enough, I was ready. So, you know, all these different things, I think you see them all the time. Like everyone says these kinds of phrases. But for me, they mean a lot because without digital media, I definitely wouldn't be standing here talking to you. And most of the life that I have now is because of my ability to share the stories that I have in both words and in video and photo. How many of you, by show of hands, speak 3 languages? How many speak 2? Everybody speaks 1, yeah? So you guys have a really huge advantage over most of us from America and from the West, because in America a lot of us have this idea that English is just enough, right? But it's not, and especially like coming places like here in Kyrgyzstan where I can't even say anything more than how are you, nice to meet you in Russian. My reach, my impact, it's a lot smaller because of language. So you guys already have an advantage when it comes to that. So if you can just combine all that intelligence, all that language, with whatever interests you have, whether it's, you know, storytelling just itself, or photo or video, or all of them, then you have a chance to make whatever impact that you want. So whatever your heart desires, whatever your wishes are in terms of that, I hope that you achieve it, and I hope this was a small example of how that can happen. Thank you.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, I'm going to talk about some digital tools that I use for different storytelling purposes, and then give you guys some tools that you can use after you leave this really brief workshop. So for filmmaking, there are so many resources available, and all of this will be available to you after this presentation, so you don't need to write it down if you don't want to. The Australian Centre for the Moving Image just has this incredible curriculum that's available for free that will teach you everything that you need to know about filmmaking. So from the very beginning to like crafting your story, up to storyboarding, filming, editing, and they do it all with popular examples and videos that explain what these concepts are. It's just really clean and clear. And so if you're interested in filmmaking but you don't really know where to start, this is a great resource. Presentation programs. I don't see a lot of people talk about PowerPoint as a storytelling tool, but maybe that's why I like to talk about it. I think we've all seen really bad examples of PowerPoint over the years. You know, bad colors and fonts, too much animation, ugly pictures and graphics, right? And when I see something like this, even if the speaker is giving me really great information, I sort of like zone out and I can't pay attention to it. So just briefly, I'll just kind of go over some like best practices that I use when designing this kind of stuff. I usually start really simply. Okay, so at the very top, maybe my slide theme and an image, just enough so that I can remember what I'm talking about. And then maybe a few points of highlighted text on the side, just a couple things that I want my audience to remember. So let's say, for example, I was talking about digital tools, computers, smartphone, the internet. Usually what I do is I go to Google and I try to get some supporting images. Now, a lot of people would just stop here. Like, okay, I've got my image, I'm good. But the image is kind of grainy, it doesn't really match. One thing I like to do with Google is, if you look up here, there are all these different tools that you can use at the top there, and you can set them to different things. And one of my favorites is this one right here. It says transparent. So this will give you a PNG image that you can overlay onto your presentations, and then it kind of blends in with the background. It just makes it look a lot neater. Or if you want to take it up another level, you can go to this type area, and there's a button called animated. And what this will do is it will only give you moving GIFs. And so now I've got my moving GIF that illustrates my theme, match my background color to that, and we're good to go. So now I'm taking that slide that was a little boring at the beginning and trying to make it a little more engaging for my audience. And PowerPoint, Keynote, whether you use Mac or PC, these are really robust programs. So my work with American councils, I did sort of this animation series on misinformation, and I did the entire thing in PowerPoint. So all of this, all the animations, everything you're seeing is just done in PowerPoint. And I assure you I'm not like an expert in PowerPoint, okay? This was all like self-taught, just trying things out, having an idea, and then being like, I wonder if I can do this. So keep your options open for that. Briefly, Instagram. So Instagram, like 2 years ago, introduced this stories feature, which has sort of like ascended Snapchat as like the predominant way people share stories. And the reason for this was that people felt this pressure to share amazing stories all the time on Instagram. Like maybe they weren't always on vacation, maybe they didn't have these amazing meals in front of them that they could share. But the stories on Instagram are brief. They show up for 24 hours and then they're gone. So for my business, Splendid Beast, one thing that we did was we added GIF packs to Instagram. All right, so you see Mr. David in the corner there. We green screened some GIFs that you can add in there. We put our paintings in, and then we encourage people to go to museums and place our paintings into the actual museum. Other things that we've been able to do are like polls, so like who wore it better, the men in the movie or the dogs that we painted, and then people vote. Or even just like a simple slider, where like you rate things based on whether you think we should add this to our template lineup. It's just a way to get people engaged with your content in a way that maybe doesn't seem intuitive at first. All right, and then one more, cinemagraphs. So if you've never seen a cinematograph, it's kind of like a combination of a video and a photo. So some parts are still, and then some parts are moving. And especially on social media, these are like, they draw your attention in a really unique way, because you tend to focus on, it tricks your mind a little bit. You see them and you think like, well, things are moving, but things aren't moving. And if you can get someone's attention, even for a few extra seconds, that's the name of the game on social media. And so using cinemagraphs for either advertisements or just personal photos can be a really fun way to liven up your content. And it's something I don't see a lot of people doing, which is the reason that I bring it up. Okay, so we only have an hour here, so we tried to cover a lot. Let me just kind of outline what resources will be available to you after we leave this talk and how you can use them. So I talked at the beginning about structure and these different frames that we have for storytelling. And we didn't get a lot of time to go over them. We just don't have that kind of time. But I'd like to make those available to you guys after this presentation. So one thing that we didn't cover are these sort of like basic plots that we see recurring throughout time. And there's 7 in total, but we kind of focus on 5 that work both for personal and professional storytelling. And what we'll provide to you guys afterwards is an outline that you can use to tell your story in a way where you only have to focus on the details that are important to you. So these outlines are really nice because you focus on your personal details, and then the story sort of tells itself. It has the conflict in it, it has the background, it takes care of the setting, all those different things for you. So for example, if I was telling the story of my business and using one of these templates, I could say, Splendid Beast started when I found myself in Vietnam looking for soup. This is kind of like the origin story of how I started my business. I was looking for soup, I got lost, I went down the wrong alley, and I found an entire street of oil painting reproduction, something that I had never seen before. And so that started the idea for this business. Okay, the idea grabbed me because I had been looking for a creative way to express myself and also to start a business back home. Okay? So it's just really nice to have these kinds of templates that you can use to tell your stories. And then, for example, things like a rags to riches story, it also goes through the different plot points and how these plots should move. So that if you don't want to use the structure, you can still use the basic idea of how the plot should move along. Okay. So this would be the part to write down or take a picture of. We started a Facebook group for a workshop that we just finished over in the room next door for different young people who are interested in telling their own stories. And so if you go to this Facebook page, you'll find all of the resources as well as some of the stories that we created over the last 2 days. So once you've joined this Facebook group, you can go to this resources section, and it will link out to different resources. It'll link you to the slides that we've used tonight, as well as all of these different story structures that you can apply to your own storytelling. And they'll go into a lot more detail than I can go into in this brief amount of time. And so you'll see things like this, like an origin story outline that you can use and then begin adapting your stories. And if you do use some of these things, feel free to post in that group. We are always interested in collecting stories from around the world. Like we said, it's our first time in Russia, so we see a lot of stories from India and Afghanistan and these other communities we work with, but not a lot from Russia because this is our first time here. So we'd love to see what you come up with if you decide to use any of these things, either personally or professionally. And so I would like to leave you with this final thought. It comes from a storyteller named Donald Miller. He says, good stories don't happen by accident. They are formed and molded. And it's not always the best stories that get the most attention. It's more often the ones that are the most clearly told. So rather than focusing on the gear that you have or expensive cameras or all those kinds of things, try to focus on what you can control, which is telling your story in the most clear way possible using templates and examples that have been provided to you by other people. Thanks a lot. We have like 5 minutes. I don't know if you guys have any specific questions. We'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, if not, you know, you can come up and talk to us privately. We'd be happy to answer. Sounds good. All right. Yeah, if you have any questions, come up and talk to us. We'll be around to chat.